Welcome to The Fix,
the new way to get your copy reviewed by two former copy chiefs.
because whether you're an aspiring copywriter or you've been in the industry for decades,
The best way to improve your work isn't to read books, blog posts, or online guides.
it's to see real writing, your writing, being reviewed and improved in front of your eyes.
And that's the goal of The Fix, to bring you inside a virtual writer's room
And watch along as we review, edit and rewrite real copy.
from real writers like you. So let's get straight into this week's episode. And remember, if you like what you see here,
Please share The Fix with anyone you think would find it valuable. It is completely free. Is there such a thing as writer's block in the world of copywriting, or is it all a load of rubbish? That's the question that we asked you a few weeks ago over email, and we got a lot of interesting answers back. So we thought we'd do a whole episode today looking at some of the most interesting responses that we got and discussing, well, one, whether writer's block is real or not, and two, if it is real, how you can get around it and spend less time wasting time and more time writing. Glenn, I assume you have some sort of skit prepared around the subject of writer's block.
my name is Glenn Fisher and I haven't written a word of copy for 22 years. I'm trying to understand why, how I've not been able to get the words out. I've done everything that the doctor has told me, the shaman. I went to see the copy shaman in Brazil. He couldn't help. It's terrible. Is there such a thing as writer's block? We discovered, ill-prepared
Seconds before we came on air.
as ever, that we disagree. So one thing is, I would say, just to clarify, and I think this comes up in a few of the answers that we got, is we could go for this topic for days, and writing generally. I think we need to just go for me, as will become clear in this episode, and we'll discover and unpeel the onion, so to speak. But I think we need to talk about it in regards to copywriting, not writing a novel, not like create more traditionally creative work. I don't like to say copy isn't creative, but more traditionally creative work. That's about ideas and stuff like that. But I think when it comes to copywriting, for me, I will put my mast, and like James O'Brien maybe on his radio show, I might be swayed by your arguments, I don't know, but my gut feeling is I don't think there is such a thing as writer's block when it comes to copywriting, because I think it all comes down to the preparation you do. But we'll unpack that as we come on.
Yeah, why don't we go into the emails that we got first, and then we'll kind of riff around
Yep.
it. So first email that we got, I'm going to bring up on screen now. It's quite a long one, but I thought it had some interesting ideas in it. By the way, I took everybody's names off these emails because we didn't actually ask if we could publish people's names. I didn't want to upset anybody, but apologies if you wanted your name on the email and it's not there. So this first note says, I think it's more useful to think of its writer's block as resistance. It's what Stephen Pressfield describes in The Art of War as an energy field radiating from a work in potential, a repelling force. And then to ask how and why resistance is showing up and what's the root. So here's what it looks like for me. Often when I sit down to write, it's like pulling teeth. I start and stop, write a sentence and delete it, spend 30 minutes messing with a single paragraph. I feel like I'm being strangled. It feels like crippling perfectionism and fear. Calling this writer's block doesn't get me anywhere. But when I can recognize it as resistance showing up as fear, I can start to target the root cause of that fear and give it a name. And no, it means my critical editor brain is running the show instead of my creative brain, and that I need to find a way to turn off the former to empower the latter. I need to work on separating my process into two distinct phases, writing and editing. Brackets, this is my current big challenge. And then I can ask what habits and rituals I can use to support me. Can I experiment with turning my screen off or reducing the font size so I can't see what I'm writing and edit myself as I go? Could I practice free writing under a time constraint on a subject that has nothing to do with the work I'm doing at the moment to flex that muscle? So there's quite a lot going on there. Love the reference to The Art of War.
Yeah, I think it's War of Art rather than the Su Shing or whatever.
Did I say it wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, I just read, sorry.
Stephen Pressfield, I don't think, wrote the ancient book about how to flank your enemies.
I did think that as I was reading it. Well, either The Art of War or The War of Art.
The Art of War by, I think it's Lao Tsung or something like that, is a very, you should read that as a copyright book. I think I recommend it as a copywriting book once.
It's the sort of thing you would recommend.
But yeah, it's all about flanking your enemy, understand, but it's about perception and looking at it. Anyway,
What I do when
we'll come back to a special
if
episode.
If you've got writer's block, what I like to do is try to outflank the laptop.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
get round the side of it.
Yeah.
Look at things from a different angle. Right, we're getting off topic straight away.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stuff in there. The things that I always find the most useful are, because I am like this, I focus on routines and exercises and flexing your copy muscles, things that you can actively do to mix things up when you're a little bit stuck, because that's how I like to go about things. I don't riff it at all. I think, okay, if I can't do it, I'll try this, or I'll write it like that, or whatever that might be. Perhaps one time we should do a whole episode just on that subject. But I certainly think that that's true, that battle between the two sides of your brain. That's really, whatever you call the two sides of your brain. So for me, it wouldn't be my editor and my creative side, it might be something else. But often a form of writer's block or a form of block descends on you when that little voice in the back of your head tells you that what you're writing is rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's strong enough to make you not even want to write it.
Yeah.
That's effectively what writer's block is, right? If you can ignore that enough to get something out onto the page, you're off and running. But if you feel like, oh God, this isn't even worth putting on the page, it's so bad, then that voice has sort of overcome you. That's what writer's block is.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking now, I'm already slightly moving my dial to say that there isn't, I would maybe say I would not say there is no such thing as writer's block, a nice double negative for us, but I don't see any reason why you should suffer writer's block. That's where I'm coming from. Because I think what that raised and what you're saying, that kind of, if you go, why are you suffering these things? And I think from that letter, one of the best things to take away, or really interesting, is that separation between the act of writing and the act of editing. Because if you are trying to write, but you are already thinking in editing mode and thinking, oh, well, what I've got to produce has got to be the final thing. Yeah, that's probably going to cripple you and bring in that fear and think, oh, there's no point in even writing this because it's not going to be right. Nothing's going to be right first time. All your first drafts are shit, or whatever Hemingway says, and all this kind of stuff, and countless other writers have said. But to separate them out I think that's a really useful thing to do. First of all, that's quite a high level thing of saying, right, I'm just going to write something first, even if it's a load of tosh, then I can edit it later. So I like that idea of like separating that out. I think the person who said that, they're thinking the right way. That's separate those out. But then once it comes down to the creative act, then you say, right, I'm blocked creatively. I don't know what to write. Ultimately this is the thing about writer's block for me. What is writer's block? And that's perhaps what we need to define really. It's you're blocked from writing something. So what does that mean? It means I can't write, or I won't write. It's not that you won't write, it's that you feel like you can't write or can't express something. Now, the case for me, and this is why I kind of err on the side of saying there's no such thing as writer's block, or rather there's no reason why you should suffer writer's block, is because if you identify it as a reason, as what it is that you can't write something because you don't know how to express something, then what is the thing you're trying to express? The chances are you don't know enough about that thing, or you don't know what it is you're trying to express. How do you solve that? You have to find out more. You have to do the research. You have to do that. I still think it's good to get rid of the editing thing. Get rid of that. That's on the side. But then when you're then going, right, okay, I'm going to write about ducks, and it's like, right, well, what are you writing about ducks? And you go, sorry, I'm going to write about ducks, and then you sit down, blank page, and go, right, ducks are
ducks. We all love them.
Like, what am I going to write about that? It's like, right, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to write. So what's the brief? Go back to that. Right, it's why ducks are evil. And you're like, okay, well, sit back down at that point and go, ducks are evil because, oh, I don't know, I'm blocked. I've got writer's block. I don't know how to express this.
I wonder if we could define it differently, or I think I would define it differently, because I think there's two forms of writer's block that we could talk about. One is what you're talking about, which is like you fundamentally don't even know what your messaging is yet.
Yeah.
So there's two ways of dealing with that. One is riff it out, just start writing, because you might sometimes just, as long as you're comfortable with it as being part of your process, just getting some words out on the page, you might find something. We're working on something together at the moment, which we'll talk about in a later episode, later in the year, because it's to do with what we're doing here at The Fix. But we're sort of riffing it out a little bit. We haven't quite figured out exactly what it is we're trying to do. So we're writing a lot, and then we're crossing a lot out and saying, oh, that was good and that was good. So you could do that. Just say, don't worry, it will all, most of it be rubbish, but I might find something. I might find a fresh phrase. You can do that. Or you can go back a step and say, right, I need to just write out in shorthand how I would describe this idea to a friend in a pub or another writer, like a brief, like write your own brief out.
Yeah.
So you can kind of take a step back from the idea. But that's only one type of writer's block where you don't know what your messaging is. The kind I get, and why would be an admission, I don't mind admitting, sometimes I know exactly what I want to write, but I just cannot find a way of saying it. I usually get writer's block around the first lines, where you just cannot, you know exactly where you're going, and you think, by the time I'm on line 5 of this note, I'm fine. But I cannot get there. That's a kind of writer's block. And I think we all experience that, and that is not down to not knowing what your messaging is, not knowing what your plan is, and not having enough research. It is a creative feeling of, I cannot find a fresh way to get into this story I want to tell. And I think, to me, that's the harder kind of writer's block, because that is true creative. It's a true creative block, you know?
True, yeah. Although I think, without being too twee, I think the person who sent this in, the thoughts were just that separating the creative from the editorial in that particular instance of being blocked from how, so there's not knowing what to express is one type of writer's block, in which case you need to go back to the drawing board, you need to do more research, understand. However, you might then go, well, I think I've got enough to go with, which is like where we are with what we're working on kind of thing. So we can riff around that, and we trust our creative things to do that. But then there's sometimes when, even though you've done all the research, as you say, and you know what you're writing, but then it's not what to express, but how do you express it? Then yes, that feels like another blockage, and you're going, okay, well, how do I express it? That's where you do need to separate the creative from the editor and say, right, well, I'll just try 5 different ways of saying this. I'll get something on the page, and I will understand that whatever I write might be nonsense, and I'll write it again, and I'll do it again. Or this just become a fisticuff situation, or you can kind of go back again and say, well, you haven't actually, because you haven't done the research in the sense of how to express it. So you know what you want to express, but you don't know how to express it. There's still a case, I would say, for you haven't done the work in your subconscious, in your research mode, in whatever preemptive preparation that you would do as a copywriter on a job, say, where this is where we come back to the bath situation. I know this is a recurring thing, but one of the things I will do, I will lay in the bath and I'll be going, right, okay, what am I trying to express? Figure that out.
Yeah, the creative.
Then I'll have a soap. No, but then I will figure out what I'm trying to express, and then it's like, right, okay, well, I've identified, so how do I do that? I identify the target audience. Where are they? What are they thinking? All the basic things that we've covered elsewhere and we'll cover again. But now I know, right, I know what to express. How do I express it? How do we now be creative in that? Oh, I don't know. Then I will think more internally before, I guess this is what I'm saying, writer's block. If you've got writer's block, you shouldn't be at the computer. That's ultimately my kind of philosophy about it, really, is that you should be in the bath. No, you should be thinking about, okay, how do I creatively express that? Because I don't know. So don't sit there. I would find that daunting, kind of going, oh, there's the white page looking at me. And that's the fear everybody says, the cliched image of like the white page. Don't be daunted by that. Don't be intimidated by it. Go in the bath, go for a walk. I'm sponsored by, I'm trying to think of a bathroom range now.
I'm not going to give you.
I'm thinking of Carphone Warehouse.
Opposite Shanks?
No, because in Grimsby there's a Carphone Warehouse next to the bathroom store or something. So I've always associated the two. Just on the phone in the bath. In your car phone. Yeah. Anyway,
once you start talking about the bath, it's time to move on to the next reader
yeah.
email.
But yeah, so I would just separate those two things out and always go back to your preparation.
Writer's block happens when you don't really give a damn about what you're trying to write. This can happen when the topic of your copy project is not your cup of tea. That's why I say no to projects I know that will bore me to tears. But writer's block can also hit me in a very different situation. It definitely happens to me when I've been trying to go with a novel project for a long time. This scenario is definitely more depressive. I've personally suffered it multiple times, and I think it's because I never have dedicated enough time to finishing a novel, and then my unfinished novels accompany me throughout the years. But then I grow up and live and have life experiences, some better than others, and one day I sit down, months after I wrote the last word of my unfinished novel, and I realise it no longer interests me. I got bored of it, like I sometimes get bored of myself, and that's when I suffer writer's block. I think we should park the subject of creative writing in terms of writing a novel, because you can do a whole show on that. Since you are writing a novel.
We can do a very niche show on novels, but
you can do that. But
I would transfer that to just saying long copy, a longer copy project, so we can talk about that kind of thing, because it's the same thing if you haven't got like sub thing about novels. It's just you need to have legs. You need to be interested in that thing to be able to keep going. And it's the same with a piece of copy. So without having to dismiss it, I think it's just going anything long. If you're writing a long sales letter, which I know that's where your most of your copywriting is, you won't embark on that until you know that you've got the legs to take that.
Yeah, you have to know you can sustain it. I think if I was going to draw a comparison between a long sales letter and a novel, I've never written a novel, so I'm not an expert. But I have written, I've written fiction in the past. I think if I was suffering from writer's block or something akin to that sense of malaise of like, I just don't like this anymore, or whatever, it might be something like that. I just don't care anymore. You have to go back to the reader and the reader's emotion and where that emotion is, and really think about that, because that's what drives the project creatively. You're writing to a person with problems, with wants, with desires, and you're trying to address them or work with them. I think it's probably true that in a novel or a piece of fiction, you would think about your characters again, because your characters are what animate your novel. So you have to think carefully about, well, what would these people do? How would they be feeling? How would they be thinking? What would they be reacting? And probably, without trying to be an expert, something I'm not, thinking that way would probably yield something. And if it doesn't, you're probably not fleshed your characters out enough. In the same way that if you can't get that sense of energy in action, in a piece of sales copy, you've probably not really understood your reader closely enough, because it should matter to your reader what you're writing about. Otherwise, it doesn't matter to you and it doesn't matter to them.
I mean, there's an interesting aspect that kind of moves us back to the first part of this observation, which is a very good one. But the idea that if you're not interested in what you're writing, of course that's going to create block. It goes back to the initial base argument of well, do you know what you're writing and think? If you're not interested in it, yeah. If you're definitely not interested in it, get rid of it. If you don't have to do that piece of copy, you don't do that piece of copy. But real terms, practical terms, chances are you're a jobbing copywriter. You're going to have projects that come in that you have to take on board that you don't want to, that you're not necessarily, wow, like I love this. Like
of course not. You have to get into it.
You have to get into it. So I've always argued that if you do the research, we go back to like Ogilvy saying, like, always sticks in my mind, the loudest thing on the car is the clock kind of thing. How did you get that? It's becoming obsessed with that product, becoming obsessed with why the reader might care about that thing. So I see it as a personal responsibility for the copywriter. And this is where creativity does come into copywriting massively. It's almost like, how can you make yourself a more creative person? Is look at that brief, look at that product or service you're selling, and figure out, why would this be exciting? And this speaks to what you were just speaking about. In the same way you would look at characters in a novel, why would they do this? What motivates them? But why would the reader be interested in that? And the same with a piece of copy. Why would the reader, the audience that you're going to be writing, be interested in it? And if you can put yourself in their shoes, that will start to help you animate yourself and become interested in it. And then that's the kind of chameleon kind of nature of being a copywriter, is becoming a person obsessed with this particular thing. Once you do that, your writer's block will disappear, because you are now in it and you're now newly amazed of, wow, this is really good, this is really interesting, because I can see it from the audience's point of view.
It's certainly true that if you try and make it about people, if you're struggling, try and make it about people, make it about your customer, really try to imagine them, what their problems are, how they feel, and then talk directly to that. That in general is going to, it may not end up in your final draft, but it's probably going to loosen you up enough to say, well, how would you say it then? Come on, just imagine I'm that person. Well, what would you say to me about this? And it probably, by the way, it probably isn't the clever thing you've been trying to say, because that is one thing I definitely find myself doing. Actually, most of our emails are from people claiming that writer's block doesn't exist, which you're also in that camp. I'm in the complete opposite camp, which is I feel like I get it all the time, just not on a project level, but on a line by line level. Oh, this doesn't work or whatever. There are ways around that, but I think you've got to acknowledge it. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
There's another person agreeing with you. It's all lies. I don't think you can have writer's block.
Sorry, can you read the emoji out as well, please?
What is that emoji?
I think it's laughing, like the face, like it's kind of going, oh.
Okay, it's all lies.
There we go, thank you.
I don't think you can have writer's block in copy. It's just a lack of preparation. I can understand how it could happen in fiction writing, literally having to make everything up. But for copy, I just don't think it exists. If you have enough research and know the objective, you shouldn't ever have writer's block. You might have nothing but bad ideas, but I don't think you should have nothing to write.
So my emails are getting through.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I don't think we need to go into detail on that, because that's effectively what your position is.
But I will use this opportunity to say something else. And I don't think my position is particularly clear, actually. As I say, I kind of acknowledge that you might be have trouble writing, but there's no need to, because there's things you can do. But one thing in the last email we saw saying about being depressed, being down, like thinking, and to echo this last one, that your ideas might be bad, that kind of thing, and being depressed by it, and feeling like you can't do it. I think what I'm trying to advocate for is at that point, and without being too waffy, you can't just go away to the cinema for 2 hours and everything. I know there's deadlines and stuff, but as much as possible, even if it is just to go make a cup of tea, like get away from that. Because if whilst you're in that mindset, unless you are have already developed a strong skin, so I can imagine you will be able to kind of fight it a bit.
Yeah.
And I do, like realistically, where it's like, no, I want to get out at 4 and I'm going to do it now, and I trust myself and I know myself. It's just about knowing yourself. But if you are earlier in your career, if you've not kind of built that quite up yet, as much as possible, like give yourself just 5, even if it's just like count to 10 kind of thing. Just get away from it a little bit. Change yourself physically. I know I sound like Mary Kondo or something like that, but it's probably not Kondo, it's Kondo or whatever. Whoever kisses the clothes and throws them out anyway. People will know what I'm talking about. But like, just get away from it, because your physical, your mind, all of that is linked. And if you are going, oh, this is rubbish, I'm depressed by this, I'm down about it, that's not probably going to be conducive to getting that stuff out. So just freshen up. We'll move on, because I'm about to mention the bath, but what I didn't say about the bath is once I've done the preparation work, then I'm ready to run naked through the halls, but ready to go for it and get the ideas out. So when I approach the blank page, I'm there already, rather than sit there going, don't know how to express this. I've got that physicality. So that's where people say, oh, this is a bad idea before I've even started, or I'm feeling really down about this. That's not a good way to approach the page. Like, you want to be naturally in like an excited mode when you're writing, I think.
Well, on that subject, I think in a later episode we will try and have a guest on. So we'll try and have Woody on. Now, we'll explain who he is at different times, but someone who we've both worked with. I still work for him. I've never known anybody's process to involve such pain and anguish in almost every piece of sales copy he wrote. Yeah. His process seemed to involve convincing himself that he could no longer write sales copy, and it was painful to watch, wasn't it?
I've sat with him in Waterloo bars where he was ready to give up writing a piece
Every
of copy,
time.
and then he'd write the breakthrough promo.
He was a fantastic
the next
copywriter.
day, kind of thing.
But his process was like, he'd call you and be like, I'm in the bathroom, I just can't do it. So
mostly, we spend our times in the bath. That's what, if anybody can take any away from this show, it's what most copywriters are in the bath.
But some people's process involves that. And I think the darkness, going to the dark place and feeling like, God, I can't do it anymore. That's part of being a copywriter. That's part of what makes it so difficult.
And I don't, by me saying, oh, I'm a Zen man, I just approach the page. I will then walk away going, well, that's a load of crap. Like, what the hell am I doing? Kind of thing. But I'll always have something to review. And that's when the editing kicks in. And you go, right, well, that is crap. How do we change that?
Yeah.
And it's always going to be hard. But again, it's just, you should always have something, because if you've done the prep, you've always got that something to work with. Then the editor, then it's not writer's block, it's just writing, it's just editing. It's just like, right, well, yeah, and we're all in that. Then you can start using tools and formulas and stuff that actually help you logically go through it.
Yeah, I think exercises is, I want to do a whole episode on that, so we'll come back. Let's just do the last email, and then I'm going to give my number one suggestion for what to do if you've got writer's block. This is, I've put this email in because, well, you'll see why in a second. Hi, Glenn. Loving your work on the fix with the other guy. That other guy would be me. You wanted a quote on writer's block. Here's mine. It all depends on the kind of writing you're engaging in. In news writing, we don't necessarily get writer's block, more writer overload, because there's so much choice to write about. Where do we start? In copywriting, it's a case of how do we start the copy that will hook the reader in, but once the hook is there, the creative juices flow from there like a stream. There's not a lot for us to riff on there apart from that. Yeah, that's probably true. So my final suggestion for everybody is, if you do have writer's block, send what you have, whether that's a piece of copy, the beginning of a piece of copy, a half-finished piece of copy, or just your idea, to us. And we'll look at it in the fix. You can email us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. After all, that is the whole point of the fix, which is to take your creative problems, whether that's a piece of writing that you want reviewing or an idea you want help shaping, and we will do a creative review on it and try and give you some ways forward. Because one thing is always true: if you've got writer's block, the person you send the copy to doesn't have writer's block. They're not going to reply and say, I can't do it either. They will almost certainly, whoever they are, it could be us, it could be another person that you send your copy to, they will see something in your work and say, why don't you try it like this or like this or like this? And that is a time-honoured way of kind of, breaking the deadlock there.
Yeah.
Get somebody else to look at it, because you've almost certainly just gone to the dark place, or you've just got stuck on an idea or stuck on a process or a sentence or a word, and you can't get out of it. And somebody else will always help you kind of shape something from it.
Always use reflection. Half the best promos and pieces of copy in the world have come about from the other person relative to the copywriter. So I'll explain something to you, and you'll go, right. Oh, well, isn't that quacking duck? And I'll go, quacking duck, that's the best line I've ever heard. And I'll write the copy. Yes, you came up, but it's only through that back and forth that you get that. It's kind of, to bat my own side of the thing, is you're putting your preparation out to that other person. You're letting them do some of that thinking for you. But sometimes that's good. That's like, because you just can't, you're just like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure how to do this. I don't know what to express, or I've got through that. If you don't know what to express, you need to speak to the client. If you don't know how to express it, then speak to somebody outside of that circle, another copywriter, us, your partner or whatever, but speak to someone else, and they'll reflect back that like prep work that I would say you should try and do internally. And
the way that you explain the idea to them is, half the time, that is what the copy ends up being. Yeah. So remember that you aren't alone, metaphorically and just pragmatically. There are other people that you can work with, and all the best copy is always going to have been reviewed by somebody else. It's always a collaborative process on some level or another. So keep that in mind. You can get us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. I reckon we wrap things up today because we could talk about this all day, but we would probably have nothing else.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a cute way to finish, like whether writer's block exists or not, but then I immediately started going for the old Rumsfeld known unknowns quote, so let's just not even go there.
I think we'll just cut to a picture of you in the bath and get out of here.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next week for another episode of The Fix. Thank you very much and goodbye.
And there we have it. We hope you got something valuable out of today's episode of The Fix.
Maybe it sparked an idea or two for your next writing project. Maybe it triggered a new headline, opening line, or story to tell your reader.
Maybe it inspired you to scrap what you have and start over. Or maybe it made you want to submit your current work in progress for a little constructive feedback. If that is the case, send your copy to us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. Or if you don't want us to review a specific piece of writing, send us a problem you're trying to solve.
Or a challenge you want input on, and we'll do our best to help.
And remember, if you like The Fix, please do share it with other writers, business owners, and marketers.